we're going to learn about hand building lidded containers and wheel throwing lidded containers. This project, once we get done demoing, we're going to demo today, and on Tuesday, we're going to talk about surface designs. I'm going to give you a couple of new options. And then you're going to have 4 to 5 days, I can't remember, we have kind of that weird schedule for the next little while, on this project. And you get a pick. Are you going to do wheel thrown or hand built, or a combination of the two? You can kind of choose how that looks for you. On your note sheet, I expect you to take notes. I expect you to write down some of these things that I say, hey, this is important, so that you can go with it. On the back, you need to sketch out 5 different containers and lids. And it says you need to show embellishments and surface manipulation, and they need to be detailed and take up the page. If you turn in a sheet, because I am going to collect these and check them off, and there's like 5 little tiny sketches up in the corner here, you did not do your job. You need to fill it up. You need to think through this. Sketching out helps you build it before you build it. So make sure you're doing that. Okay. I'm going to start by throwing out some slabs. And while I do that, I want you to look at some pieces as they come around. So I'm going to send around both hand-built and wheel-thrown pieces. And you can see that. So on your sheet, you need to make yourself familiar with the idea of what a gallery is and what a flange is. So a gallery is what holds a lid, or sometimes the lid can have a gallery, and that's what's holding the lid in place. A flange is what it sits on or what it guides. So as you look at those papers, okay, you can see that. The flange of a jar guides the lid into place. The gallery is what it sits on. And then the flange of the lid, and not all of them have all of these, but the flange of the lid helps guide it into and past the gallery. Is that making enough sense for now? Okay. So here's a hand-built piece. There's a gallery in there. The lid sits on the gallery. You could call the edges of my lid a flange, but I would just call it a lid. So I'll pass that around. Another hand-built piece. This has more of a shape instead of a circle. We're going to talk about that. You can pass that around. Just so you can start to see these. The way I'm going to demo today is pretty much the only way I do my hand-built galleries and flanges. But you can do other things. So this, if you look on your sheet, is like a number 4. Well, it's more like a number 2. It has the rim, which would be a flange, and then it has the lid, which has a gallery and a flange, and it's just going to sit right on top there. Most of your pieces are going to have knobs or handles. This one has a little knob, but for the most part, you just pick this guy up off the side there. So you can check that out, and that's wheel thrown. This is another wheel thrown, and it sits in the middle, has a thrown knob on it. We'll get to that today. And then this one I'm going to pass has what I call a tapered gallery and flange. It's like a combo, and we'll do that. And it's not an exact or a square. It kind of just sits down in there. Okay. All right, and then I'm going to send around this one. It needs to be cleaned up a little bit, both the lid and everything else. But You can kind of feel it at the stage. Now, if you want to do something complex, and I haven't done this on there, I put little locking mechanisms in there. So I could make a lid that goes down in there, turns and locks, which would be kind of cool. If you want to see somebody do that, there's a guy named Ann Clark, A-N-D Clark, and I think there's a number at the end, but it'll show up. If you type in Ann Clark on Instagram, he does movable part ceramics, which is really cool. Okay, and then we have some others. I'll send this around. This is one I made yesterday, and then these I made today, so I'm not going to send them around because they're still fairly soft. Okay, I used speckled clay on those. I'm going to use B-Mix on this. It doesn't matter which one you use. I wouldn't use recycled clay for the biggest reason of recycled clay takes longer to dry. And we want our clay to stiffen up fairly quickly. When we're working with lids, we want and cleaning them up. Now, here's a hint for you. There's 2 ways or time frames for making lids and containers. And it goes like this. The first one is you make the container and the lid same day, same clay. Okay? You should remember that. Same day, same clay. And the reason for that is same moisture content and same basic drying cycle. Okay. Now, if you have very consistent clay, and B-Mix is pretty consistent, speckled is pretty consistent, the second way, and this works mostly with round pieces, the second way is when you make it in the workable stage, it's brand new made, you can measure and then you can build a lid to that measurement. Now, I want you to think in your head, if you made a piece and it is bone dry, and then you were to measure and then make a lid for that bone dry piece, and you made it to fit exact, would it fit exact when it's dried and fired? No. Because it shrinks. So, when we get back on the wheel, you'll kind of see this, but I know potters who they throw similar things and they throw them to the exact measurement every time. And one of the reasons for that is they can have a customer 3 years later call them up and say, hey, I bought this type of a jar. And they go, I can send you a lid. Oh, and then the customer says, my lid broke. And they can send them a new lid because their clay is consistent and their measurements are consistent. So everything's measured at 3 inches exact. So they can send them out and the chance of it fitting is pretty good. Okay, throw out another slab so we don't have to do all that in a minute. Now, you can just throw out your slabs without wedging your clay. I find that my edges are a little bit more rough when I do that. You see how my edge is kind of folded, where on these they're nice and round, but it doesn't really matter. I'm going to move this out of the way. You watch my clay. All right, and And then I usually throw out my slabs lengthwise. So in this case, however much I need to wrap around something. And I'm gonna do all that freehand today. And then I do my height. And I'm gonna make them just a tiny bit thicker than normal, so that they have some holding. And I'm not gonna make huge jars. I'm gonna make some small jars. Okay, we're gonna start by cutting out our slabs. Now, I cut this with my measuring stick. There's my flat bottom. And you can do a couple of things. If you want, you can measure from the bottom to wherever you want it to go. For me, I usually just come in here and line this up on the bottom. That's parallel, pretty close. Okay, and depending on what I want, I'm gonna put this on the side. That gives me a 90-degree angle. And then I have to think, there's two types of overlapping cuts for this. If I'm going to do this one, where it has some sort of a point, my cuts are both gonna go inward. So I'm gonna cut in and then cut in. If I'm gonna do a circle like this, I'm gonna cut in one way and out the other, okay? And I'm going to do both of them to show you why we do that. So I'm going to cut this in. That gives me where my height's going to be. And I don't want one that tall, so I'm going to come in right here and line that up on that edge. That now gives me a 90-degree angle here. And if you're having a hard time thinking what that actually looks like, if I measured from the bottom here and the bottom here to where the edge of my stick is, it should measure the same if I have a 90-degree angle, okay? If you don't believe me, you go right ahead and measure, that's fine. I don't really care. Set that up there. Make sure you're putting your clay away or using it. Now, this one, I'm gonna cut in, so I cut it in this way, and I'm gonna cut in this way. So line that up, cut at an angle there. Think about a 45. So this is 90. If you come at about a 45, so it's about halfway. It doesn't have to be exact. Clay is pretty forgiving, but you don't have to be like, well, it has to be exact. It doesn't. Get it close. Okay, gonna set that aside. Let's just use this as our smaller one. I already cut in one way, right? So on this one, I'm gonna cut out. So we're gonna line this up on the bottom. Line that up parallel. Some people would call it square. Cut that, hopefully that's all right, that's all right. Put those there. And then I'm gonna cut a top. So I'm gonna line this up again on my straight edge here. So instead of having to measure from the bottom to the top, come in here. Cut that. Okay, so that's there. Now, I'm going to leave that out there. There are two basic ways of putting a gallery in here. And then with two types. I usually use square pieces, but you can use round pieces if you want. And it looks something like this. So I'm going to come in here and cut this flat. I meant to do that before. This is the same length as my piece here. I'm going to come in here and cut this flat, like that. Now, with the piece that goes in one side and out the other, I can bend this either way and it's going to line up. With the piece that goes in and in, I have to bend it one way. It has to go this way. Okay, can you see that? If I don't do it that way, then I have a weird cut. So if I'm going to do that, and I want to put my flange on, my gallery on, I'm going to come in here and line that up there. So my cuts, I need to see my cuts. Now, there's lots of ways to get this on here. Again, you can measure. I'm just going to give it a quick line. So that looks good enough to me. I'm going to grab my rib. I would put my gallery down further than you think. Your lids are probably going to be thicker than you think, and you don't want a lid that's like sticking way up or really heavy. All right, get that there. Add some slip. Flip this over and line that up the best you can. If it's a little off, it'll be okay. And we all have our own levels of particularness or pickiness or perfectionism. And then I'm going to cut this at that same angle as it goes down. I'm going to cut this at that same angle as it goes down. Actually, I want my serrated fettling knife. So come in here and cut that. If I don't cut that, when I go to fold it up, it's going to have too much clay, and we don't want that. All right, set that aside. I'm going to gently flip this like that. Score that. Flip this. Score that. Before I do more, my wood knife, I'm going to come in here and compress my seam. Okay, a little bit of slip. There's a lady that sometimes we watch a video on in Ceramics 1, and when she says slip, she goes slip. It's pretty amazing. Okay, I'm going to just free form this and get that pushed together. We don't want to use a lot of water. We want to compress this, get that basic shape. This is kind of a teardrop shape. We can come in and clean up this edge later. A little bit extra there, so it's peeling off. You can paddle it. I like to clean that up when it is leather hard. Okay, basic idea. I'm going to put a little tiny coil on the inside seam. So my wood knife comes in handy here. We're going to press that in. Now, what kind of lidded containers can you imagine? What kind of, and I'm not talking like decoration, I'm talking function. What kind of lidded containers are there? I'm going to flip this over and put another coil. If you can reach all the way down, put a coil all the way down. If you can't, put it in at least on the top third. Yeah. Yeah, of course. Wait. Never mind. I was going to say, are you going to go to the bathroom like you go to the bathroom the other classes, and then you end up here for way too long? That's what happens, right? She goes to the bathroom, no, not her. Other people go to the bathroom and they end up here. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm going to the bathroom. So I'm wondering if she's gonna go hang out in math class for a minute. Probably not. Okay, put that coil in there. Now, sometimes when you fold it, it creates this little ripple, and you just come and press that down. If you forget about it and it gets leather hard, you can shave it down. Nothing big there. Now, on a lid, this is the way I would do a lid. And depending on how misshapen your piece is, on purpose or on accident, you can just cut it out. One of the reasons why I like these little pointed containers is it tells us what direction the lid goes. A round one doesn't necessarily tell us, and when we're hand building, it's a little bit harder to get that lid where we want it. I'm gonna throw this out. Now, if I want my lid, to be round. You see how this is round? Okay, it's like a little bowl. Okay, that's actually done by putting it, and this one we did like this little notch in it, but that's done by putting it on the bottom and rounding it, because the bottom is the exact same image as the top, where if we do this on the top, when we go to flip it over, it would be the opposite. Okay? So what that is, and this is a good example because we did this on purpose. How was math class? Yeah. Okay, do you see that little dent there? If I make a lid that fits right there and I flip it over, that dent's going to be on the other side now, right? But if I flip this over and make the lid here, when I clean that up and flip it over, that dent's going to be on the same side as the dent on the top. Okay? So if you're making a specialty lid and you want it round, I would recommend forming it actually on the bottom. Okay? If it's round, you don't have to. But so we'll flip this over, set it there. Because we want that to sit. So in this case, I'm going to come in here. You can get the general idea. I would go a little bit bigger. And then this is one of the reasons why we want our pieces to be a little thicker, so that we can press down and it'll hold that support it as we press down. You can use a sponge to do that. And I would do this and then leave it. And we're going to leave it for a while. This was done last class. It's still pretty soft, and I want to be able to really work that. Now, here's a hint for you, and I'm going to have some saran wrap for this. As we're working, if you put saran wrap, and the reason I'm going to have saran wrap, I don't want you to rip all my bags up. But you can take a bag or saran wrap, and you can rip it or cut it or whatever, and then you can set it in there. And that way you can push pretty hard, get that moving, but then you can pop that right out when you need to, and it's not actually stuck. So just a little tip for you as we do this. This piece here, I'm going to put a knob on later when it's leather hard, but I want it to be in there, and it's not all the way down, but I want it to understand kind of the form or the shape that it's going to be having the rest of its life, basically. And then as it gets leather hard, I will come in and trim it either my lid or my flange so that my lid sits down on the gallery really as best as it can. As we're going, if you have a question or want me to recover something, please let me know. Okay, yeah?
Did you make this?
Yes.
How'd you make the lid?
We'll talk about that when we get on the wheel. Score that. Score this. Have I put a gallery on this one yet? No? Okay, so we're going to put a gallery when it's up. It's a little bit different, so I'm going to get this pushed together. Now, we're making lidded containers, and so that's the first criteria. Yeah?
Could you do it around one of those instead of
Yeah, absolutely. You can. I'm just freehanding it because it's saving time. But if you want to do it around a cylinder, you're more than welcome to. It's almost impossible to do the one I just showed you with the gallery on the inside wrapped around one of those. It's not impossible, but it's harder. So one of the criteria is lidded containers. How many? At least one. But you're going to spend at least 4 to 5 days on this project. We're going to talk about more surface stuff next class. And then, but some of the things I want you to focus on. So round can be a problem, right? You guys pay attention? Mm-hmm. Are you?
round can be a problem?
There we go. Okay. Or in this case, not round. You can take one of these little flower pots. There's 4 or 5 of them around. And you can set that in there, push down and push out a little bit, and that'll kind of give you a more roundness. Gently flip that over, and then do it again. So some of the things you can focus on. Creativity, quantity, quality, and concept. Okay? So those 4 things are super important. And if you are focusing more on, say, an idea, then you don't have to make as many. If you're focusing on more of a sculptural piece, maybe it can be a little bit chunky. So kind of think about those things there. All right, I'm going to cut a piece here. Did you just break my piece?
No, that scared me.
Don't break yours though.
I'm not gonna cut. Look at the water in there.
Okay, cut a little piece there. Now, doing it this way is perfectly acceptable, but it's harder to score and slip. It's harder to get it in there. But you can do this when it's a little more leather hard. I'm just going to come in here and just guess. And I could have scored this while it was down, so it's more lined up. And we can put this in there. That might work better. If you are using your clay in the workable stage and you have a very light scoring and slipping, but get it compressed in, the chance of it staying is pretty good. B-mix and speckled clay both do a pretty good job. Now, I'm going to make sure this is my seam. I'm going to make sure that there's a solid edge on my seam. I don't want my new seam to end up on my old seam. So, get that in, line it up the best I can, and get that compressed in. Now I'm looking to make sure it's fairly level before I really compress it in. If it's not completely level, it'll be okay. unless you're making some sort of like fermenting jar. And if you're doing that, then you should be really careful to get things, because you want that seal. But we're not going to make fermenting jars. A lady asked me to make fermenting jars for her so she could ferment like cabbage and stuff into sauerkraut and kimchi and things like that. And she wanted me to make her a big one like this. And I said, well, if I'm going to make you a custom-made fermenting jar, that's going to be about $300. And she goes, well, I can go up to the mending shed and buy one for $150. And I said, you should do that. So she did. Like, and they're great, and that's perfectly fine. I'm like, but if you want a custom one, it's a lot of work. If you don't know what a fermenting jar is, you should look it up. They're kind of cool. They have like a little water gallery, and then you have stones that go in it to hold your vegetables down. Yeah.
When you were talking about like the ones that like lock,
Uh-huh.
do you do that? Like, would you have to make like the lid part like longer so it goes down?
So you could make like the lid longer, and then create like a little key. I think it would look sort of like, let me see if I can quickly tell you. So if the lid's up here, it would go down, and that's where it would drop down, and then you would turn it so it can't come up. So something like that. That's the quick version. If that's something you want to do, that would be more on that concept, right? You could spend more time building that concept than doing lots of stuff or whatever. Okay, so this, we're going to cut a circle out. I think that's all I'm going to show you today over here. Then we're going to go on the wheel. I'm going to come in here and just gently press down. This should give me a little bit of an outline. Then I'm just going to cut this straight up and down. Another way of doing this, you can put water-soluble ink, so like a marker, on your edge, and then flip it over, and that will leave a mark. You're cutting the inside. So for the most part, that's going to line up there. Now here's another tip for you, and we'll talk about this more on the back, but if you are putting a lid on the inside of your pot, you want your lid to be larger so you can trim it down. If you're putting the lid on the outside of your pot, you want your lid to be smaller so you can trim it out. Okay, and it's more applicable on the wheel. Now, if I want this to be bent, I can use the bottom to do this, or I can just start here. If I put this down in here too tightly, it will stick. Now, if you can see, do you see how what was once straight up and down is now bent in? What I'm looking for is that corner right there to be the same diameter as my line right there, so that when I flip it over, I can trim off this extra right here, and it should drop right down. Okay? It's something we'll actually do on Tuesday as these harden up. So, again, don't rip my bags. I'll have some saran wrap. I just forgot to grab it. I thought I had some. I thought Gillespie had some. He probably does. Probably gets sick and tired of me stealing his stuff. Whatever. Okay, we'll set that aside. I could put a bottom on it now. I can put it on it later. For times, we're not going to put a bottom on it. Any questions on those? Okay, that's the general idea of what a hand-built lidded container is. Again, if you want to do something different than I'm showing you on lidded containers, you can. The one I showed you this morning, if you remember it, was square, right? There was straight up sides. You can make slab pieces like that have lids, and you can do all of those great things there. Little jewelry boxes and fun stuff. So, any questions there? Okay, let's head to the back. Bring your notes. This is where lids get a little bit more complex.